Into the boundless depths of obscure night my consciousness first stirred, as if awakening from some unfathomable slumber which no mortal mind was meant to comprehend. Blackness, not the mere absence of light, but a positive, palpable darkness that seemed to press upon me from all sides, engulfed my senses utterly. No ray, no glimmer, no faintest phosphorescence penetrated this void wherein I found myself imprisoned. It was then, in that moment of terrible awakening, that the ghastly truth manifested itself within my reeling thoughts. I, Mordecai Morbus, had passed beyond the veil of the living. The certainty of this fact struck me with a peculiar horror, for while I knew beyond all doubt that death had claimed me, I remained somehow sentient, aware, trapped within this lightless purgatory. Through the nebulous haze of recollection, I grasped at fragments of memory. The year was 1911. This much I recalled with certainty. Vienna had been my dwelling place, that ancient city of imperial grandeur and hidden knowledge, where the Danube flows dark and silent beneath stone bridges centuries old. But how had I met my end? What dread circumstances had ushered me into this abysmal void? Like distant echoes across vast chasms of emptiness, voices from that final moment whispered in the chambers of my memory, "Thank God, Lord, have given mercy to Mariam and the boys." One had uttered in tones of profound relief, as if some great and terrible burden had been lifted from the speaker's soul. Then, venomous with hatred, another voice had spat the words, "Good riddance." These conflicting utterances cast my thoughts into confusion and disquiet. What manner of man had I been to inspire both pious gratitude for my demise and such vehement loathing? And who were Mariam and the boys, whose deliverance from some unnamed peril seemed cause for divine thanksgiving? As I pondered these disjointed recollections in my midnight prison, a cold dread began to seep into the essence of my being, a premonition that the answers I sought might reveal horrors beyond imagining, and that the darkness encompassing me was perhaps not a punishment but a mercy compared to what awaited in the fullness of remembrance. Then, as if summoned by the tumult of my thoughts, a change manifested in the impenetrable void. At first I doubted the evidence of my senses, for how could light exist in such a place? Yet there it was, a phosphorescent glow, faint but unmistakable, coalescing into a humanoid shape. An ethereal, cloaked figure emerged slowly from the darkness, its form rendered in pallid luminescence against the abyssal black. As this spectral visitor approached, the radiance it emitted, not the wholesome light of sun or flame, but the unwholesome gleam of certain deep-sea creatures or phosphorescent fungi, illuminated more of my surroundings. With mounting terror, I beheld the true nature of my prison. Not a confined sepulchre as I had imagined, but a boundless realm of darkness stretching endlessly in all directions. A cosmic void beyond the comprehension of mortal minds. The floor beneath me, if such a term could be applied to that strange surface, undulated with textures resembling nothing known to terrestrial architecture, as if composed of some alien substance neither solid nor liquid. The cloaked figure halted several paces from where I crouched. Its face, if indeed it possessed such a feature, concealed entirely within the shadowed recesses of its hood. For an interminable span, we regarded one another in silence, until at last I summoned the courage to address it. "What manner of place is this?" I inquired, my voice sounding thin and hollow in that vast emptiness. "Is this the afterlife promised by the Church, or some more eldritch realm unknown to the theologies of men?" The figure remained motionless, and when it finally spoke, its voice seemed not to emanate from beneath the hood, but rather from the darkness all around us. A whisper that somehow reached my ears from every direction simultaneously.
"You know this place, Mordecai Morbus."
"You know this place, Mordecai Morbus," it intoned, in tones that reminded me of wind through ancient crypts. "You sought it often enough in life." This cryptic response stirred within me a vague unease. "I sought death?" I ventured cautiously. A sound emerged from the hooded figure, a dry rattling noise that I realized with horror was laughter. "Not death," it corrected. "Knowledge, power, communion with that which dwells beyond the threshold of human comprehension." Fragments of memory stirred within me, candlelit chambers, ancient tomes bound in materials that no bookbinder would acknowledge, syllables of power that scorched the tongue even as they were uttered. Yet these recollections remained tantalizingly incomplete, like pieces of a shattered mirror that refused to form a coherent whole. "Who are you?" I demanded, a nameless dread building within me. "What do you know of me and my pursuits?" "I know all that you were," the figure replied with terrible calm. "All that you did. All that you sacrificed in your insatiable hunger for forbidden wisdom. Tell me," I implored, dreading the answer yet unable to restrain my questioning. "Tell me how I came to this end. Why do I recall those voices? Who are Mariam and the boys?" The cloaked entity tilted its head slightly, an eerily human gesture from so inhuman a being. "You truly do not remember?" it inquired, and I detected what might have been amusement in its sepulchral voice. "Perhaps that is a mercy, but mercy is not the purpose of this place, Mordecai Morbus. Truth is its purpose, the truth you evaded in life." From beneath its cloak, it extended what appeared to be a hand, though the proportions seemed subtly wrong, the fingers too numerous and jointed in places where human anatomy permitted no articulation. With this appendage, it gestured expansively, and suddenly the darkness surrounding us shimmered, like the surface of a pond disturbed by a falling stone. Images formed in the void, visions of Vienna, of my townhouse on Bergas, of my study with its walls lined with books whose existence most libraries would deny. I saw myself bent over an antique desk, quill in hand, transcribing symbols from a manuscript whose yellowed pages seemed to pulse with unwholesome vitality. "You were a scholar," the figure continued as I watched my past self with growing unease. "A seeker after hidden truths. But conventional learning soon ceased to satisfy your intellect. You turned to older sources of knowledge, grimoires, forbidden texts, artifacts smuggled from archaeological sites where workers refused to continue digging after encountering certain discoveries." The vision shifted, showing a different scene. A cellar beneath my home, its walls inscribed with symbols I recognized as variations on those found in certain pre-cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia. A circle had been drawn upon the floor, its circumference marked with sigils that seemed to writhe and change when viewed directly. Candles of an unpleasant grayish substance burned at strategic points around this circle, their flames an unnatural violet hue. "The ritual of communion," the cloaked figure said, naming what I now observed. performed on 7 consecutive nights when certain stars stood in particular alignments. You sought contact with entities whose very existence is anathema to the ordered cosmos, beings from outside, from between the interstices of reality. I watched in horror as my past self moved around the circle, chanting phrases that, even in this vision, were mercifully inaudible. The air within the circle seemed to thicken, to congeal into a shape both amorphous and possessed of dreadful symmetries that the human mind refuses to comprehend. The first night, nothing responded to your call, my guide continued dispassionately. The second, you heard whispers. The third, you glimpsed shadows moving where no shadow should exist. The fourth night, it spoke to you. The fifth, it offered knowledge in exchange for tribute. A terrible suspicion was forming in my mind, a dread conjecture concerning those voices I had heard in my final moments. What tribute? I whispered, though I feared I already knew the answer. The cloaked figure made no reply, merely gestured again, and the vision changed once more. Now I beheld a woman, Mariam, I knew instinctively, my wife, and 2 young boys. They were in their bedchambers, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the horror that had taken residence beneath their home. No, I protested, revulsion rising within me like a tide. I would never. But you did, the figure interrupted, its voice now cold as the space between stars. Not immediately, not willingly perhaps, but the entity with which you had established communion was patient. It whispered to you night after night, eroding your resolve, your morality, your very humanity, until at last you convinced yourself that the knowledge it offered was worth any price. The vision shifted again, and I cried out in anguish at what I now witnessed, a scene of such unspeakable atrocity that my mind recoiled from it, refusing to acknowledge that the perpetrator of these horrors wore my face, moved with my hands. Yet even as I denied it, memories long suppressed came flooding back. The smell of blood, the sound of desperate pleas for mercy, the sensation of something alien entering my consciousness as the abominable ritual reached its climax. Enough, I screamed, falling to my knees upon that strange surface that was not quite solid. Show me no more. I remember now. God help me, I remember all of it. The visions mercifully faded, leaving only the boundless dark and the glowing cloaked figure before me. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by my ragged breathing. A curious phenomenon, I realized distantly, for one who no longer lived. The entity you contacted, the figure eventually continued, was not satisfied with the sacrifice you offered. Such beings are never sated. It demanded more, always more. But there was opposition to your activities, a secret society of occultists who, unlike you, understood the necessity of keeping certain doors forever closed. Another vision materialized, men in dark attire, bearing arcane implements, surrounding my home. I recognized some of them, colleagues from the university, antiquarians whose offers to purchase certain items from my collection I had declined, a priest from the Stephansdom with whom I had once debated theological obscurities. They came for you on the 7th night, the figure explained. Too late to save your family, but in time to prevent the completion of your final ritual, one that would have torn asunder the veil between worlds and admitted into our reality horrors beyond comprehension. I saw myself wild-eyed and disheveled, surrounded by these grim-faced men. In my hand I clutched a dagger of curious workmanship, its blades stained dark. The men spoke words of binding and banishment, not directed at me, but at something else. Something that had partially manifested within the ritual circle. A presence of such profound wrongness that my mind, even now, skittered away from its direct contemplation. "They destroyed the entity you had so foolishly summoned," said my guide. "And then they executed judgment upon its summoner. Hence those voices you recall, gratitude that your wife and sons were beyond further suffering, and contempt for the man who had sacrificed them on the altar of forbidden knowledge." The vision faded, leaving me once more in darkness with my mysterious companion. I knelt there, overcome with the weight of revelation, the horror of my own deeds. "Why show me this?" I finally managed to ask. "Why not let me suffer in ignorance for eternity?" "Because ignorance is not your punishment, Mordecai Morbus," the figure replied. "Knowledge is. Complete, inescapable knowledge of what you were and what you did." I looked up at the cloaked shape, a terrible suspicion dawning. "And what are you? A demon sent to torment me? An angel of judgment?" For the first time, the figure moved toward me, closing the distance between us with a gliding motion that suggested it did not quite touch the strange surface upon which I knelt. "I am neither demon nor angel," it said, its voice now softer, almost intimate. "I am something far more terrible to you." With a gesture both elegant and horrifying, the figure reached up to its hood. Slowly, inexorably, it drew back the concealing fabric, revealing nothing. Where a face should have been, there was only empty darkness within the hood. "I don't understand," I stammered, drawing back in confusion and terror.
You will,
the figure assured me. And then, with a single, fluid movement, it cast aside the cloak entirely. What stood revealed before me defied description in human language. It was a shifting mass of forms and features, all recognizable yet horribly distorted. Limbs bent at impossible angles, organs exposed that should remain forever hidden, faces contorted in expressions of agony or ecstasy, or both at once. And with a jolt of recognition that sent me spiraling into fresh depths of horror, I realized that I recognized these faces. Mariam, my sons, others who had vanished from Vienna's streets during the years of my occult experimentation. But worse than this was the realization that these tortured forms comprised only a fraction of the entity's substance. The remainder was something wholly alien, geometries that violated the laws of Euclidean space, textures that suggested materials unknown to terrestrial science, and at the thing's core, a pulsing, writhing mass that somehow conveyed the impression of ravenous, implacable hunger. What are you?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer with dreadful certainty.
I am you, Mordecai Morbus,
the abomination replied, its voice now a chorus of all those I had sacrificed.
I am the essence of your deeds, the spiritual residue of your sins, given form and consciousness. I am what you made of yourself through your choices. I am your true face, stripped of the mask of humanity you wore in life.
As this revelation crashed upon me like a physical blow, I understood at last the nature of my eternal punishment. Not fire, not ice, not even the vacant darkness of oblivion, but the unending contemplation of my own monstrosity, the knowledge of what I had become through my pursuit of forbidden knowledge. And as I gazed upon the embodiment of my spiritual corruption, I knew that this was merely the beginning of an eternity of such revelations, an infinity of moments in which I would confront, again and again, the full measure of my depravity. The entity that was myself spread what might have been arms in a gesture of terrible embrace. "Welcome," it said, "to the only afterlife you deserve." And I knew then that the darkness surrounding us was not a place at all, but the interior landscape of my own corrupted soul, a void I had created through my actions, an emptiness that would never again know light or peace, or the blessed oblivion of non-existence. I had sought knowledge beyond mortal ken. Now I would possess it for all eternity.